human breaks through soldiers to reach alien girl, only for the soldiers to kneel to human. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Ethan Walker's heart pounded in his chest, the adrenaline coursing through his veins as he crouched behind a metal pillar. He peered around the corner, his eyes locking onto the group of alien soldiers stationed between him and Zalira, the girl he had sworn to protect. She was just a few yards away, her blue skin shining faintly under the harsh lights of the military facility. The soldiers were oblivious to him for now, distracted by the orders they had just received. Ethan's breathing was steady, but his mind raced. He had to act. This wasn't just a mission, it was personal. The memory of Zalira's eyes, wide with fear when she had been captured, was enough to fuel his determination. She wasn't just a prisoner, she was someone he had come to care for, someone who had shown him a side of the galaxy he hadn't seen before. His mission was simple: get to her, break her free, and protect her. But the obstacles were immense. These soldiers weren't just regular troops, they were elite guards, trained to handle threats like him. Ethan wasn't sure how much longer he could stay hidden, but he knew one thing: he couldn't afford to fail. With a final glance at Zalira, Ethan gritted his teeth, adjusting his black combat armor. He had no choice but to fight his way through. Taking a deep breath, he darted out from his cover, moving quickly and silently. His combat training kicked in, every movement precise and calculated. He heard the soldiers' voices rise in alarm as he made his way towards Zalira, but he didn't stop. His heart hammered in his chest, his focus razor-sharp. The first soldier was upon him before he knew it. Ethan grabbed his rifle, knocking it aside with a swift motion. A punch to the soldier's gut sent him stumbling back, disoriented. Another soldier lunged, but Ethan ducked low, sweeping his legs out from under him. It wasn't pretty, but it was effective. Ethan didn't have time to waste. He reached Zalira's cell, tearing through the door controls with ease. As the door slid open, she looked up in shock, her expression changing from fear to relief as her eyes met his. "You came," she whispered, her voice soft. Ethan gave her a half-smile, reaching out to help her to her feet. "I wasn't going to let them keep you here," he replied. The soldiers had caught up with him by then, a dozen of them charging toward him in a coordinated assault. Ethan raised his rifle, ready to fight. But something unexpected happened. As the soldiers closed in, they stopped. They knelt, one by one, their heads bowed in submission. Ethan blinked in confusion, unsure of what was happening. Zalira stepped forward, her gaze meeting the leader of the soldiers. She spoke a single word in a language he didn't understand. The soldiers, once ready to fight, now remained kneeling, their eyes averted. Why are they kneeling?" Ethan asked, still trying to process the sudden shift in the atmosphere. Zalira looked at him, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Because of you. You have proven yourself to them." Ethan glanced at the soldiers, now silent and obedient, and then back at Zalira. "I didn't do anything special," he said, his voice soft. "You did more than you realize," Zalira replied, her eyes full of gratitude. In that moment, Ethan understood. It wasn't just about fighting, it was about something deeper. Something that transcended the battlefield. And in that moment, he felt a new kind of power, one that came from within, from the connection he had forged with this alien girl, and the respect he had earned from those who had once seen him as an enemy. As the silence stretched in the room, Ethan glanced down at Zalira, still processing the unexpected turn of events. The soldiers, once poised to end his life, now remained kneeling before him, their heads bowed in respect. The weight of their surrender hung in the air like an invisible force. He shifted his gaze back to Zalira, who had stepped away from him, her eyes scanning the soldiers with a mix of curiosity and something else, something deeper. "Why are they kneeling?" Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. Zalira didn't answer immediately, her gaze flickering back to the soldiers. She took a slow breath, as if choosing her words carefully. In our culture, she began, her voice calm but full of authority, strength isn't just about power or combat. It's about honor, sacrifice, and understanding. They see your willingness to risk everything for me, a foreigner, someone not even of your own species. That is something they understand and respect. Ethan felt a sense of humility wash over him, the enormity of the moment settling in. He had never considered how his actions might be viewed by others, especially not by those who came from a place so far removed from his own. He was just a soldier, following orders, doing his job. But in this moment, something had changed, not just for him, but for those around him. The soldiers who once saw him as a threat now saw him as something else. He turned to face the leader of the soldiers, whose eyes were still cast downward. "Are you going to keep kneeling?" Ethan asked, his tone steady but carrying an unspoken command. The leader slowly raised his head, meeting Ethan's gaze for the first time. There was no animosity in his eyes, no defiance. Just respect. "No, Commander," the leader replied, his voice firm but filled with reverence. "We kneel because we recognize your strength, your resolve. You have earned our respect." Ethan nodded slowly, the gravity of the situation still settling within him. Zalira moved beside him, her presence steadying him, offering him a silent support. "This is your moment," she whispered. "You have proven not only to them but to yourself what you are capable of. You are more than just a soldier." Ethan took a deep breath, glancing at the kneeling soldiers. It wasn't about the fight anymore. It wasn't even about the mission. It was about something greater, something he had yet to fully understand. "Get up," he said softly, his voice carrying across the quiet room. Slowly, the soldiers stood, their eyes never leaving him, their posture no longer one of subjugation but of equality. Zalira stepped forward, her expression one of quiet admiration. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "I never imagined someone like you would come to my aid. I owe you more than you can imagine." Ethan gave her a small smile, feeling the weight of the past few moments. "You don't owe me anything. We're in this together," he replied, his words simple but carrying the weight of their shared experience. As the soldiers began to retreat, leaving the two of them in the quiet aftermath, Ethan couldn't help but wonder what the future would hold. The path ahead was uncertain, full of challenges he had yet to face, but for the first time, he felt ready. Ready to stand by Zalira, ready to face whatever came next. And whatever came next, he knew he wouldn't be alone. As the last of the soldiers filed out, the air felt still, almost unnaturally so. Ethan stood silently for a moment, taking in the gravity of the situation. Zalira's soft footsteps were the only sound that broke the quiet. She moved to his side, her eyes still reflecting the conflict she had just witnessed. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice gentle but filled with concern. Ethan turned to her, offering a reassuring smile, though he could still feel the tension of the moment in his chest. "I'm fine," he said, but the truth was, he was still processing everything that had just happened. He had never imagined that one simple act of courage would change the course of the mission, and perhaps even his life. He could feel the weight of the eyes that had watched him, not as an enemy, but as something else, a symbol of respect. A sense of pride surged within him, but he quickly pushed it aside. This wasn't about him. It was about protecting Zalira. "We should keep moving," Ethan said, his voice steady. Zalira nodded, though her gaze lingered on him for a moment longer, as if trying to understand something about him. She said nothing, but her eyes spoke volumes. There was something unspoken between them now, a bond forged in the heat of the moment. Together, they moved swiftly through the facility, avoiding patrols and staying in the shadows. The soldiers had been a barrier, yes, but now, they were no longer an immediate threat. Still, Ethan knew the real challenge was just beginning. They were in enemy territory, and there was no telling what awaited them. The further they went, the more Ethan could sense the oppressive atmosphere of the place. Every corner felt like it held some kind of danger, every room potentially hiding enemies. But as they navigated the corridors, he began to notice something strange. The usual cold, sterile silence of the facility had shifted. There were whispers now, quiet murmurs that seemed to carry with them an air of anticipation. The facility wasn't just a prison, it was something more. Zalira's presence here, Ethan realized, wasn't just about her being a prisoner. It was about her being something else entirely, something that these soldiers had feared, respected, and perhaps even worshipped. They had seen her as a symbol of something beyond themselves. Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. He had no idea what she was to them, but he was beginning to understand that she was more than just an alien girl in need of rescue. She was a key to something much larger. "What are they saying?" Ethan asked, breaking the silence as they rounded a corner. Zalira's eyes flickered with uncertainty for just a moment, before she responded, "They're not just soldiers. They're part of a larger force, a movement. They believe in a cause that goes beyond mere loyalty to their queen." Ethan's brow furrowed as he processed her words. "A movement?" he asked. "What kind of movement?" Zalira paused for a moment, her eyes scanning the hallway ahead. "A revolution," she said softly. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. A revolution? What kind of revolution could this alien force be planning, and what role did Zalira play in it? The questions filled his mind, but he knew one thing for certain: this was far from over. They were walking into something much bigger than he had originally thought. And for the first time since this mission had started, he wasn't sure if he was ready for what was coming next. But one thing was clear: whatever the future held, he would face it with Zalira by his side. And together, they would uncover the truth about the revolution that threatened to shake the very foundations of the galaxy. As they moved deeper into the facility, the hum of the walls around them seemed to grow louder, almost as if the building itself was alive, aware of their presence. Ethan felt the weight of the silence pressing in on him, the tension palpable in the air. The further they went, the more the corridors seemed to close in, as if trying to trap them inside. He glanced at Zalira, who walked beside him, her pace steady but her eyes darting nervously. She was trying to remain calm, but Ethan could see the underlying fear in her expression. She wasn't just worried for herself, she was worried for him, too. "We need to hurry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan nodded, glancing around as they reached another intersection. He had been trained to stay alert, to anticipate threats before they appeared, but there was something about this place, something unsettling, that made every corner feel like a new danger waiting to spring. As they turned a corner, a door slid open in front of them, and Ethan instinctively reached for his weapon. But it wasn't soldiers that stepped out. It was a woman. She was tall and elegant, with dark skin that shimmered in the low light, her eyes glowing faintly with an inner power. She wore an intricate uniform, adorned with symbols that Ethan couldn't recognize. The woman's gaze locked onto Zalira, and for a moment, there was a strange, unspoken connection between them. "Zalira," the woman said softly, her voice smooth and melodic. "You've returned." Ethan stood frozen, unsure of what to do. This wasn't a soldier, but the way she looked at Zalira, the way she carried herself, there was something powerful about her, something that made Ethan feel as though he was intruding in a world he didn't understand. Zalira, on the other hand, seemed to relax slightly, though she still stood close to Ethan. "I didn't think you'd be here," Zalira replied, her voice guarded. "I thought you were with the others." The woman smiled, a knowing smile, and then turned her gaze to Ethan. "Who is this?" she asked, her tone shifting. "A human, I assume." Zalira nodded, but Ethan could see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She had clearly not expected this meeting, and the tension between her and the woman was undeniable. "Yes," Zalira said, her voice steady. "He's here to help me." The woman's eyes softened, but her posture remained rigid. "Help," she repeated, as if the concept was foreign to her. "You brought him here to help you, but you know what this place is, don't you?" Ethan didn't understand what they were talking about, but he could feel the tension rise again. This woman wasn't just a bystander, she was someone important. Someone powerful. "This is the heart of the revolution," Zalira said quietly, her voice full of quiet determination. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. A revolution? The revolution is more than just a fight for freedom, the woman said, her voice low and intense. It's a fight for our very existence. For who we are. You, human, might think you're helping her, but you have no idea what you're truly getting involved in. Ethan met her gaze, his mind racing. He hadn't signed up for any revolution. He had come here to rescue Zalira, to get her to safety. But this was bigger than that. This was a cause. This was a movement that had the power to change everything. We need your help, Zalira said, stepping forward. We can't do this alone. The woman studied Ethan for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, finally, she nodded. You've proven yourself, she said. I can't say I understand it, but you've earned my respect. You'll come with us. But know this path you've chosen is not easy. There will be sacrifices. And some of you may not make it out alive. Ethan stood tall, his resolve hardening. He hadn't come this far to turn back. He didn't know what kind of revolution this was, but he knew one thing, he was in it now. And he would stand by Zalira, whatever the cost. The woman stepped aside, motioning for them to follow her. This way, she said, her voice now soft, but there was still an edge of authority. Ethan exchanged a glance with Zalira, who gave him a small, reassuring smile. Together, they followed the woman down the darkened hallway, unsure of what lay ahead, but knowing that they would face it together. As they walked down the narrow, dimly lit corridor, the air grew colder, and the silence between Ethan and Zalira became heavier. The woman who had led them was walking ahead, her steps measured and precise. Ethan glanced at Zalira, who was following closely behind him. He could sense the tension in her body, the unease that lingered beneath her calm exterior. Whatever this revolution was, whatever they were about to face, it wasn't just a physical battle. It was something deeper, something that cut to the very heart of who they were. Ethan tried to shake off the feeling of dread gnawing at him. He had come this far. He couldn't back down now. Not after everything they had been through. Where are we going? Ethan asked, his voice steady, though he could feel the unease bubbling up. The woman ahead of them didn't turn around at first, but after a few moments, she spoke, her voice cold and calm. We're heading to the core of the operation. Where the leaders are. Ethan's brow furrowed at the mention of the leaders. Leaders? Yes, she replied, finally glancing over her shoulder. There are others who lead the revolution. They're the ones who make the decisions, who guide us. But they're not like you, human. They don't trust easily. Not even your kind. The word stung, but Ethan didn't react. He wasn't here to make friends, he was here to help Zalira, to keep her safe, and to figure out what kind of revolution this was. I'm not here to cause trouble, he said softly. I just want to help. The woman gave him a brief, unreadable look before turning back to face the front again. You may want to reconsider that, she said, her tone laced with a hint of warning. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, they reached a large, reinforced door. The woman paused in front of it and entered a code into a keypad on the wall. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a room beyond that was starkly different from the sterile corridors they had passed through. The room was dimly lit, filled with strange alien technology, holographic screens, and maps of distant star systems. Several figures stood around a table, speaking in low, urgent tones. As the door closed behind them, the conversation ceased, and all eyes turned toward Ethan and Zalira. The tension in the room was palpable. The woman who had brought them here stepped forward, her voice authoritative. They're here, she said simply, nodding toward Ethan and Zalira. The figures at the table exchanged glances, some with skepticism, others with curiosity. Ethan stood still, his posture firm, though he could feel the weight of their scrutiny. Zalira moved closer to him, her presence a steadying force. We need to talk, the woman who had greeted them earlier said, her voice low but commanding. She motioned for Ethan and Zalira to approach the table. As they did, the others began to speak, each one questioning, testing Ethan's resolve. One of them, a tall alien with pale green skin, crossed his arms and looked at Ethan with distrust. "And why should we trust a human?" he asked bluntly. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't let his anger show. "I'm not asking for your trust," he replied, his voice calm. "I'm here because she needs help." He gestured towards Zalira. "And I'll do whatever it takes to make sure she's safe." There was a pause, a moment of silence as the room seemed to weigh his words. The alien who had questioned him seemed to soften slightly, but he didn't break his gaze. "And what makes you think you can help her?" Another voice spoke up, a woman with blue skin and piercing silver eyes. "You have no idea what you're getting into, human. This isn't just a war. It's about survival." Ethan looked at her, his determination unwavering. "I don't care what it is. If I have to fight, then I'll fight. If I have to stand by you and protect her, I will." The room seemed to quiet at his words. Zalira stood next to him, her eyes not on the table but on the others in the room. Ethan could sense the weight of her history in this place, the burden she carried. They had fought their way here, and they weren't turning back now. Slowly, the tall alien with the green skin nodded. "You've got guts, I'll give you that," he said gruffly. "We'll see if it's enough." The woman with silver eyes finally spoke again, her voice a little softer. "We don't trust easily, but you've proven something. Maybe we can work together. But you need to understand, this is bigger than anything you've ever faced." Ethan met her gaze. "I understand," he said simply. And for the first time since he had entered this strange, alien world, he wasn't sure if he was ready. But he had come this far, and there was no turning back now. The room fell silent once more, and Ethan could feel the weight of the eyes around him. The moment was tense, filled with unspoken expectations, but he refused to break. He had made his decision, and there was no turning back now. Zalira stood beside him, her presence a quiet strength that gave him the courage he needed. The woman with silver eyes, who had been watching him closely, now spoke again, her voice softer, though still carrying the weight of authority. "You say you understand, human," she said, her tone almost a challenge. "But this is no ordinary fight. This isn't just about a war. It's about survival. For both our people and yours." Ethan nodded slowly, meeting her gaze. "I get it," he said. "But if I'm going to be part of this, I need to know what we're up against." The tall alien with the green skin who had previously spoken up now stepped forward, his arms crossed over his chest. "You think you're ready for this?" he asked. "You're just a human. You've never faced anything like what's coming. The stakes are higher than you realize." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, but he held his ground. "I've been in wars before. I've seen what happens when people do nothing. I won't stand by and let that happen again." The alien studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded once. "We're going to test you," he said. "If you can handle what's coming, then maybe you're useful to us. But if you can't, we'll leave you behind. Understand?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "I understand," he said firmly. Zalira, who had been silent until now, stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. "We don't have time for this. We have a mission to complete. If he's with me, he's with us. No more tests." The others looked at her, some with surprise, others with a flicker of respect. The woman with silver eyes nodded, her gaze softening just a fraction. "You speak with conviction, Zalira," she said. "I see why you chose him." Ethan looked at Zalira, a feeling of gratitude swelling inside him. He hadn't expected her to speak up for him, especially after everything that had happened. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice low but sincere. She met his gaze, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "You don't have to thank me," she replied. "We're in this together." The room seemed to shift after her words, as if a new understanding had been reached. The tension, while still present, seemed to loosen slightly. The alien with green skin nodded once more. Fine, he said. We'll proceed with the plan. But know this, human, you may not always have a choice in the matter. The revolution won't wait for anyone. Ethan nodded. I'm ready. Just tell me what to do. The woman with silver eyes gestured toward a large map that was displayed on one of the walls. This is the heart of the Dominion, she said, pointing to a location on the map. The place where the leaders are. But it's heavily guarded. We'll need to move carefully. Ethan studied the map, his mind racing. This was it. The moment they had been working toward, the moment that would define everything. The stakes were higher than ever, and the pressure was mounting. But he couldn't back down now. Let's move, he said, his voice resolute. We have no time to waste. The others nodded, and without another word, they began to make their way toward the door, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline as they moved through the corridors, knowing that this would be a battle like none they had faced before. But no matter what happened, he wasn't going to let Zalira down. Not now, not ever. As Ethan and Zalira moved deeper into the facility, the atmosphere shifted. The once sterile and oppressive halls had transformed into a labyrinth of dimly lit corridors and silent, watchful eyes. Every turn they made seemed to draw them closer to something unknown, something that would either make or break them. Ethan could feel the weight of his decision pressing on him. The room they had just left, filled with people who had once been strangers, was now just a distant memory. The leaders of this revolution had seen something in him. They had allowed him to stay, to be part of what was to come. But as they walked side by side, Ethan knew that the road ahead was treacherous, and that his part in this revolution was far from clear. Zalira's steps were steady, her composure unwavering, but there was something in her eyes that Ethan couldn't ignore, a sense of burden, of expectation. She had lived through so much already, and now, she was placing her trust in him. What's going to happen once we reach the leaders? Ethan asked, his voice low. Zalira didn't answer immediately. She seemed to be lost in thought, her gaze fixed ahead. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but firm. We'll have to convince them. She said. Convince them that we're not just pawns in their game, that we're not just here to be used. They will test us. It's the way of things here. Ethan glanced at her, his brow furrowing. Test us? How? Zalira looked at him then, her expression unreadable. They'll push us, Ethan. They'll push us to our limits. And if we fail, we'll be discarded. The words hit Ethan harder than he had expected. It was one thing to be in the middle of a war, but it was something else entirely to know that those you were fighting for could cast you aside without a second thought. He had always known that survival was the ultimate goal, but he hadn't realized the extent to which survival in this place would cost them. How do we prove ourselves? Ethan asked, the determination rising in his chest. Zalira stopped walking, turning to face him. For a moment, she said nothing, her eyes studying him as if measuring his very soul. Then, she spoke. We show them who we really are. We don't let them break us. No matter what they throw at us. Ethan nodded, his mind racing. He had always been one to face challenges head-on, but this was different. This wasn't just a fight against an enemy, it was a fight to prove their worth, to show that they were more than just tools in a larger game. They continued down the hallway, passing through a series of doors and security checkpoints. Each step brought them closer to the heart of the revolution, to the place where everything would change. As they reached the final door, Zalira turned to him once more, her face calm but her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. Are you ready? She asked. Ethan met her gaze, his resolve hardening. I've never been more ready. With that, Zalira pressed a button on the wall, and the door slid open. Inside was a large, circular room, its walls lined with advanced technology and holographic displays. A group of figures stood in the center, their attention focused on the two of them as they entered. The air in the room was thick with anticipation, the tension almost tangible. The leader of the group, a tall figure with sharp features and deep blue skin, stepped forward. "You've arrived," he said, his voice smooth but authoritative. "We've been waiting." Ethan stood tall, his posture steady. This was it. The moment of truth. "We're here to help," he said, his voice unwavering. The leader studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "We shall see if you are worthy." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't show it. He had come this far. And he wasn't about to back down now. The leader's gaze bore into Ethan, as if measuring him for something far greater than he could understand. The tension in the room was thick, palpable in the cold air that seemed to freeze time itself. Zalira stood beside him, her quiet presence a reminder of why they were here. Ethan felt the weight of her eyes on him, a silent plea for him to succeed. "You say you're here to help," the leader's voice was steady, but there was a challenge in it. "But how can we trust a human? How do we know that you won't betray us, just like so many others before you?" Ethan didn't flinch, despite the intensity of the moment. This wasn't just about saving Zalira anymore. It was about proving himself, proving that he was more than just a soldier from Earth. "I'm not here to betray anyone," he said, his voice steady. "I'm here because I believe in something. I believe in what you're fighting for. And I'll do whatever it takes to help you win this fight." There was a moment of silence as the leader and the others in the room took in his words. The leader's sharp eyes never left him, but there was a flicker of something, a hint of curiosity or perhaps even a shred of respect. "Very well," the leader said after a long pause. "You speak with conviction, but words mean little in a fight like this. We will test your resolve." Zalira's eyes widened, but Ethan kept his focus. Testing his resolve? He had expected it, but it didn't make it any less daunting. The leader turned toward a console on the wall and activated a series of holographic displays. "We have plans, strategies," the leader said, pointing to the images on the screen. "But we need someone who understands how to survive in hostile environments. Someone who can think outside the box. Can you do that, human?" Ethan's pulse quickened. This wasn't just about fighting. It was about strategy. It was about something he was familiar with, something he had done before in countless missions. "I can do that," he replied, his confidence unwavering. The leader nodded, seemingly satisfied, but then turned his attention to Zalira. "And you, Zalira," the leader said. "You brought him here. You trust him. But why?" Zalira didn't hesitate, her voice clear and full of conviction. "Because he has shown me that he is willing to fight for what's right," she said, her eyes never leaving the leader. "And because he cares. That's more than most people can say." The leader regarded her for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well," he said. "You both will be tested. Prove yourselves, and we will move forward. Fail, and you will be discarded." Ethan nodded. He had no illusions about what this would mean. They were standing on the edge of something far larger than they could imagine, and the path forward was shrouded in uncertainty. But one thing was clear, he wasn't going to back down. Not now, not after everything that had brought him here. "We're ready," he said, his voice steady. "Then let the test begin," the leader said, and with a final glance at Ethan and Zalira, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving them to face what was to come next. The door slid shut behind him, and for a moment, the room was silent. Zalira looked at Ethan, her expression serious but with a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "This is it," she said softly. "We prove ourselves now. Together." Ethan met her gaze, feeling the weight of her trust. "Together," he repeated, his resolve strengthening. They didn't know what the test would entail, but they would face it head-on, side by side. Whatever came next, they were ready. The door slid open, and Ethan felt a rush of cold air sweep across his skin, the tension in the room mounting with each passing second. Zalira was by his side, her posture straight but her eyes betraying a deep, quiet anxiety. They had been told to prove themselves, and now, the test was about to begin. The room they entered was stark, its walls lined with technology that seemed far beyond anything he had seen on Earth. Holographic screens blinked to life as they stepped in, illuminating the space with a soft, ethereal glow. Figures in dark, high-tech uniforms stood around the room, watching them. The leader, the one who had tested Ethan's resolve, was among them. He motioned for them to approach, his expression unreadable. Ethan's heart raced, but he forced himself to remain calm. He was a soldier, he had faced pressure before. But this was different. This was more than just a battle, it was a test of everything. Zalira stepped forward first, her voice steady. "What is the test?" she asked, her eyes meeting the leader's without hesitation. The leader didn't immediately answer. He motioned toward the center of the room, where a massive holographic map of the surrounding system appeared. It was filled with points of light, each representing a different world, a different system. "You will need to plan a strategy," the leader said, his voice calm but firm. "A strategy to infiltrate a heavily fortified enemy base. A base that holds key intel to the survival of our cause." Ethan exchanged a glance with Zalira. This wasn't just a test of their physical strength. This was a test of their minds, their ability to think and act under pressure. "You have 20 minutes, the leader continued. "Use your skills, use your knowledge, and show us that you are worthy of our cause." Zalira stepped up to the map, her fingers hovering over the projected holographic points. She glanced at Ethan, silently inviting him to join her. Together, they began to work. The clock on the wall ticked down, counting the seconds as they moved from one point to another, analyzing the defenses, planning each move with precision. Ethan felt the weight of the room's eyes on him, but he focused on the task at hand. This was his moment to prove himself. Zalira's calm demeanor helped him focus, but he could sense the pressure mounting. Every decision they made was being watched, scrutinized by the others in the room. Every move had to be perfect. "We can't approach head-on," Zalira said, her voice steady but urgent. "The enemy has too many fortified positions. We need to strike from within, using their own systems against them." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. "We'll need to hack into their communications, disable their security. We'll use the chaos to infiltrate." Zalira's eyes met his, a brief flash of approval crossing her face. "Exactly," she said. "But we'll need a distraction. Something big enough to pull their forces away from the base." They quickly mapped out a plan, their minds working in sync as they identified weak points in the enemy's defenses. As the clock ticked down, Ethan could feel the pressure building. This was more than just a fight for survival, it was a chance to prove that they were more than just pawns in this game. They were capable. They were worthy. 10 seconds, the leader called out, his voice sharp. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. They had only moments left to finalize their plan. With a final glance at Zalira, he tapped a series of commands into the holographic interface. "We're ready," he said, his voice steady. The leader nodded, a faint, approving smile on his face. "Good," he said. "You've proven yourselves." The room fell silent for a moment, and then the others began to speak, discussing the plan, analyzing their decisions. Ethan stood still, his gaze fixed on the map. He felt a sense of accomplishment, but also a sense of unease. This was only the beginning. The true test of their resolve was yet to come.